Hi, my name is Steve Chismar, Director of PennDOT's Bureau of Innovations. It is my pleasure to host a series of podcasts celebrating the 10th anniversary of Pennsylvania's State Transportation Innovation Council, or STIC. The fourth and final installment of the STIC's 10th anniversary podcast series focuses on the importance of innovation through collaboration and how the STIC continues to play a vital role in helping bring innovation to Pennsylvania. Today, I am speaking with PennDOT's Secretary, Yassmin Gramian, who has served as the STIC co-chair since 2019. Welcome, Secretary Gramian.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Can you please tell our listeners about yourself and your involvement with the Pennsylvania STIC?
Yes. So I've been involved in STIC since I began at the department in 2019. As you know, I joined the department back in June of 2019 as the Executive Deputy Secretary to then Secretary Leslie Richards. I was in that role for several months until her departure in November. In December of 2019, I was appointed by Governor Wolf to be the secretary and replace Secretary Richards' position. And I remember one of the very first meetings that I attended was a STIC meeting with back then Secretary Richards and George McCauley, who was a big promoter and advocate for STIC. And, honestly, being an engineer, all the work that we are doing in the area of innovation related to the work that we are accomplishing through STIC is very important to me. Innovation is one of my top priorities as a secretary, and I'm always very interested in the work that's being done by the group at STIC and our members and our partners.
Well, thank you, Secretary. It's hard to believe. Again, the STIC's been around for 10 years. It's interesting to be celebrating this milestone. The reality is innovation has come so far at PennDOT and for the transportation industry in general. So, like I said, the PA STIC has been around for 10 years now. What do you think are some of the benefits Pennsylvania has realized by using this state-based innovation deployment approach?
So STIC has helped to accelerate and expand the adoption of new innovations across the state. I think one of the major benefits of a program like STIC is that it provides the opportunity to bring innovation to the table and through collaboration, get buy-ins and supports from all transportation stakeholders prior to the implementation of the new technology and innovation. These innovations apply to design, construction materials, and integrating technology in transportation network. It gives our transportation stakeholders options when they're looking at projects and the ability to choose what works best for their project. And as you know, safety is a priority at the core and everything we do at PennDOT. And we have seen numerous innovations come through from the STIC program that have a tremendous safety impact to the public. I give you a couple examples. For example, we have adopted and promoted design of roundabouts and diverging diamond interchanges in lieu of traditional intersections to address high numbers of crashes and fatalities in the areas where there is a lot of multiple points of conflicts at the intersections and the interchanges. Or, for example, the high friction surface treatment. One of the very first STIC innovations has proven over and over again how effective it is in increasing roadway friction and preventing crashes. We're also sharing innovations with our local partners and ultimately improving not only Pennsylvania's state-owned road network, but also the local road network as well. As an example, the salt and snow management course, which was developed by the STIC, has helped numerous municipalities across the Commonwealth and has taught them best winter maintenance practices, which, as you know, is pretty challenging for all of us. And as a result, they managed to reduce the salt usage and ultimately, obviously, saving taxpayers' dollars. So these are some of the examples of how STIC can benefit not just Department of Transportation, but all the other transportation agencies, as well as municipalities, stakeholders, and our partners throughout the state.
Well, thank you, Secretary. And, a great segue into our next question. I heard you mention local governments. And, that's the great thing about the stick is it brings together kind of all walks of the transportation life, if you will. It brings together the public sector, the private sector, local government, state government, federal government. Well, let me ask you this. Why is it so important that public and private transportation stakeholders collaborate to advance innovation?
Well, we cannot survive without one another, right? Good government, wise policy has played a very important role in supporting the development of many, if not most, of our greatest innovations. Public sector plays a key role in steering innovation towards the good of the public, right? And as policymakers, we have to prioritize and assess where and when to invest. So we need to assess which important innovations will require support for research and development. And we should also be very thoughtful of when a technology should be given as much room as possible to get developed on an experimental basis, and then when to pilot to test the applicability of it. And finally, when to provide guidelines and regulations to address concerns and to keep the public safe. So there is it's a very interactive process, Steve. We need to support them. They need to develop it to the next level. We need to provide them an opportunity to test the technology. And finally, we need to put some guidelines and regulations in place to gain the trust of the public. And finally, public investment also plays a role creating the operating environment. This is really important as a public agency. And what I mean by that is the infrastructure that we need to provide for the private innovations to reach their full potential, right? So, for example, government did not invent the plane or the train or the automobile, but government did build the airports, the tracks, and we are in the business of constructing highways. So, we need to provide that operating environment or the infrastructure that's needed for the innovation to flourish and be implemented. We are also responsible, as I mentioned, to make sure for all these innovations that safety is at top of everything we do, and we create, safety for the people who count on using the innovation every day.
Well, thank you, Secretary Gramian. We're very fortunate here in Pennsylvania to have a very robust stick network, and again, we have a lot of players on the field, and we're getting innovations in the door and implemented as quickly as possible. And in fact, the Pennsylvania stick has been held up numerous times as a model for success. What do you think makes the Pennsylvania stick stand out from the rest?
So I think, not only did the PA stick embrace and pursue everyday counts innovation, but it was one of the very first stick, as you mentioned, if not the first, to look beyond to see what else was out there in terms of, homegrown innovations at the local level, state, national level, even international level that could potentially be implemented in Pennsylvania. I think the diversity of the representation on the STIC committee included folks from PennDOT, a wide representation by also local advocacy organizations, the planning partners, they play a key role, contractors and consultants, as well as the academia. They were at the table. And we also worked very closely with not just the state agencies, but also our federal partners, FHWA, Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. They all helped with everything we developed in terms of, the programs we introduced through everyday counts and the STIC innovation. It's not a siloed approach to advancing innovations, and STIC engages and connects everyone across PennDOT districts, which is really important. Obviously, we want to make sure that it's not just a PennDOT central office. We reach out to the 11 districts that are per se boots on the grounds, and they ultimately will use, employ, and deploy these new innovations. Also, it engages and connects PennDOT with other agencies, as I mentioned, and the business partners. We had forums with them We shared the concepts of the innovations, and the real work that came through and came to fruition, I should say, was the focus on collaboration, which is really important in the work that we are doing when we actually are focusing on anything that's new and innovative, especially in the area of transportation. So that played a major role. The other thing I want to mention is um, not only the collaboration of the different transportation stakeholders brings energy to not just PennDOT, but across the transportation industry and all the stakeholders. And it fosters the culture. Anytime you introduce new ways of doing business, you got to make sure everybody gets on board with the new way of doing business. And that's a cultural change and a mindset change sometimes, which is really important to make sure it goes across the board within our agency. So to ensure that the innovations are supported by industry, we need to work with our partners to bring down all the barriers and the roadblocks, also to make sure that everybody buys in, and if there is a need to make a cultural change or mindset shift, that there is all those who are players are involved and engaged and are promoting the changes that's coming through from innovation.
Well, thank you, Secretary. And transportation is unique because what other profession do you literally have the opportunity to touch the lives of almost everyone every day? But that said, the transportation industry is facing very unique challenges. Be it funding levels, be it staffing, be it climate change. There's obviously a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges that lie in the path of transportation. What role does innovation play in helping to solve those challenges? And how can an organization like the STIC help to overcome them?
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of challenges, Steve, but there's also some exciting transformation that are happening in transportation. We very much live in a time when innovation is shaping how people and goods move to where they need to be, right? The current decade is especially full of challenges, as you mentioned, but also opportunities from the developments in transportation technology. For example, from the rise of electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles to adoption of drones and unmanned aircraft system. Cybersecurity vulnerabilities is a big part of concerns in our infrastructure. And perhaps the most critical change of all is the one that you also mentioned, is the dramatically reduced transportation's impact on our climate before it's too late. So there is a lot of challenges, as you mentioned, and there is a lot of opportunities. And all of this is happening while we are focusing on social and economic impacts of transportation, focusing on diversity, equity, accessibility for the purpose of mobility, quality of life of the public, and economic prosperity for all the communities and people that in Pennsylvania and throughout the country. These are some of the constraints, but also criteria that we consider when we look into transportation system and the investments that we are making. But at the same time, we are at an unprecedented and pivotal period in transportation where we can create history and a new vision. And why is that? Because there is a lot of opportunities in investment. There is the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last year in November, exactly a year. It's the largest long-term investment in our infrastructure in nearly a century. And when I talk infrastructure, it's broader than DOT. It's not just building highways and bridges, ports, airports. And this bipartisan infrastructure law is also about ensuring that we build broadband, high-speed internet, clean water, cleaning the Superfund sites, re-electrifying the energy grid. And there's so many other things that we can do, which is really focus the investment to address the climate change, but also create resiliency, more importantly, equity, safety for everyone, for the public, for the people of Pennsylvania and throughout the country. And I mean everyone. It's not just those who get behind the wheels and use our highway system, but also the cyclists and the pedestrians. And also all these investments will create jobs and ultimately economic prosperity for everybody.
Well, thank you, Secretary. And obviously, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a pretty positive person. But I do want to stick to that challenges topic for 1 second here, if I can. And I want to ask you, what do you think are some of the challenges we face to deploying innovations across the state, and how can we overcome those hurdles as we move forward?
That's a great question. So I think public trust is key in successful deployment of innovation. That's very important. Public has to buy in anything new that we come up with, right? Especially in the area of transportation. Safety, reliability on the transportation system, resiliency, preventing climate disaster, quality of life, quality of everyday life for countless people all depends on how well the transportation is serving them. And that's how we can actually gain the trust of the public. So that's really important. And it's through everything we do, right? As I mentioned, the safety, reliability, and resiliency, climate change, everything. And in turn, it will require us to be creative, right? Because there's so many things we need to address. And not just in the technologies we create, but also in the policies, in the materials, the design and construction, as well as the maintenance and operations of the transportation system that we are responsible for. It all comes into play, right? From the planning, design, and policies we set to design, construction, maintenance, and operations of the system, right? Um, and what's really then becomes challenging is to make sure that we have enough resources, which includes money, funding. We need to have human resources that can address all these challenges. Trained, diverse workforce is extremely important. As you know, it's a challenge across the board in the country right now. Everybody's talking about workforce challenges. Of course, we need the support of the legislators anytime we introduce something new, innovation. We need to have the support of the legislators, and they need to hear it from their constituents. Our business partners play a major role. And of course, the collaboration with the professional societies and professional associations. Um, they are the advocates for everything we do at the DOTs, right, with the innovation. Industry partners obviously play a major role. The consultants, the contractors, the vendors that produce the materials, and of course, finally, the federal partners as well. They can tremendously help and address some of the challenges, bring down some of the barriers and the hurdles, as you mentioned.
Well, thank you, Secretary. You touched on, again, a great segue into our next question. The STIC relies on a host of just dedicated and enthusiastic folks from, again, all walks of the transportation life. We have the private sector, we have local government, state government, federal government. How do we ensure that we continue to encourage individuals to think outside of that box and take risks with innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of programs that have been introduced at PennDOT and other agencies. I've noticed, obviously, it's very important to create and foster a culture of innovation within our organization. That mindset that I talked about and the culture is very important. And we need to constantly encourage our team members to think creatively about the work they do, right? And encourage them at the same time. And so we've actually introduced a whole bunch of competitive programs or initiatives, such as the Idea Link and the Work Smart. They've been very helpful and successful internally at PennDOT when it comes to keeping our employees engaged and excited about innovations and looking through things and the work they do through the lens of innovations. And doesn't matter what they do, what kind of a job they have, whether it's design, construction, testing, or even out in the field doing maintenance work. And we've heard some tremendous ideas coming through, which is really exciting and very reassuring for all of us at PennDOT. I also think that it's very important to encourage those members of the team who are in the management or leadership positions to have an open mind, right? To listen to the new ideas that comes through from our employees. And, sometimes there is a reluctancy. I think we've passed that stage. Obviously, I've noticed with what we went through the pandemic, I see people are willing to listen at the leadership. They want to learn. They want to hear about new ideas. And they actually encourage that kind of a thinking within our organization. And of course, as you know, as I mentioned before, we need resources to develop and turn these ideas into some fruitful product. And we don't have that kind of a resources to pick and choose. And obviously that's always a challenge, but we need to show our team members that the ideas that they're bringing to us is valuable. We listen to them, and we wanted to turn it into something that's more pragmatic and effective in everyday work that we are doing at PennDOT. And that's the message that we should be sending to our employees, to create a culture of innovation within our own agency.
Fantastic, Secretary. Secretary Gramian, I want to thank you for spending some time today. Is there anything you want to add before we close?
Well, I think we covered a good amount, Steve. It was really enjoyable for me to talk to you about innovation. The only other thing that I can add is, pandemic has taught us many things, but as you know, technology and innovation was accelerated for us to first survive and continue with our safe operations, but also to create efficiency, to reduce the cost of our business. And while we are doing all this to improve safety in all modes of transportation. And one big lesson for those of us at DOT is to be flexible and open to innovations. That really what is going to promote innovations in transportation and everything we do.
What a fantastic way to wrap this up. Secretary Gramian, thank you. Thank you for joining us today and for helping us celebrate the PA STIC's 10th anniversary and its efforts to develop and deploy innovations across Pennsylvania. Visit www.penndot.pa.gov/STIC to learn more about the PA STIC and how we are innovating transportation in Pennsylvania.